and RBKC websites. The Westminster one is pretty far along in terms of the roadmap. RBKC has been involved heavily because of their website is going to align quite closely with Westminster in terms of functionality. But the actual build for that one is actually happening after we've finished Westminster. And we're going to talk a little bit about LocalGov Drupal, how we've utilized it, what we've used, and a bit more. So introductions again, just in case. If you want to fire away, Tom.
Yeah, so as we said, Tom, Managing Director. We've obviously got Hannah, Reese and Will here to kind of help oversee, who've been overseeing the project and go through the presentation. And Alistair and Lee are also on the call from Westminster and RBKC perspective to obviously give their thoughts and feedback as well if needed.
So we're going to do an overview of the LocalGov distribution and the current status. I think first of all, we've got a slide in here about why Drupal, because we wasn't sure on the list of attendees if everybody's going to have Drupal experience, know about Drupal. Sounds like quite a sizable chunk of the list actually either on Drupal or have heard of it or using Drupal, so or looking to use Drupal. So that's great to hear. I mean, just to fire off some of the benefits, obviously using an open source code base, there's a lot of benefits from that. Contributors from around the world, free code, free maintenance, testing, all the benefits of open source, no license fees. Drupal itself has a very scalable architecture, and it's already being used on some very substantial websites. I don't think I need to really sell Drupal. Sounds like most people already know what it is and what it does. So the LocalGov distribution, just to cover that really, is essentially just a set of modules. It's actually in a Drupal installation at the moment, installation profile, that handles various different sort of features of a website for you, specifically geared obviously to local governments. Here is just a list of the sort of out of the box features that they currently are supporting. I mean, I've got the sort of ellipsis at the end because there are some others, and there are more coming as well. In terms of, if you look at the roadmap, there's quite a few things that are planned or are at least being thought about. So I mean, to reel off sort of the list there, we've got the link at the top, which has got the main sort of code base there, so you can see all the different sub modules or features there that you can pick up and sort of browse around the code and have a look how it's done. But in terms of the sort of main selling points of it, there's the core distribution, which has some sort of roles, workflows, and some other sort of basic core features that are needed throughout all of the other sub modules. There's a feature for guides, so that concept of having sort of an overarching page and then sub pages within a guide itself, almost like a book that you can browse back and forth on. And then step by step is quite similar to a guide, but that's sort of like a step-by-step process. So it might be, for example, which you've probably seen on obviously local government websites, you know, like finding your bin collection day, that kind of thing. And then there's also events in there. So that was fairly recent. I think that just finished development as we started to pick up the project, which was perfect timing for us. And then the services there. So it looks like with those service landing pages with the top level sort of tasks or links and all the sub-service pages with inside them. So I'll show you some examples of the ones that we've used, so it's not just a list of me chatting. And then the directories, which someone spoke about a minute ago, that they're planning to use. So that's a nice, really powerful feature. We're not currently using it on Westminster, but there are plans to use it. So that's a really powerful sort of piece of kit there, where you can sort of set up directories of sort of location-based data. So you could set up a directory of schools, for example, a directory of charging points, and then it comes with some nice features out of the box to give you a map and search abilities, and they come with facets to filter down So sort of give you these sort of sub searches of all these different directories of information. We have subsites, which was campaigns that's just been changed to subsites. So to create these sort of campaign or sort of like subsite pages, to have sort of quite a different look and feel to them compared to the sort of the rest of the website. We haven't used that again. That was actually in development as we built Westminster, and it probably would have been something that we may have used for some of sort of the landing pages, but we didn't actually use that because it wasn't ready at the time. There's another feature for components, so a lot of paragraphs, different types of paragraphs. If you're familiar with Drupal and the concept of paragraphs, there's some nice out-of-the-box components there that you can use and reuse and extend upon. The alert banners, so quite obvious one at the moment is obviously having that COVID warning at the top of your website. So there's various different banners with different styles for different types of events. So you've got like an announcement or the death of a notable person, warnings, alerts, that kind of thing. That's a nice piece of functionality there to have those sort of site-wide banners that you can put up and take down at will. And then there is also a base theme. So if you install the distribution or you have a look at some of the demo sites that are out there, they'll have sort of the base theme there, which is just to try and help give you an idea of what the distribution can do, and use that as a sort of basis to do your own theme or extend from it, or just use it as a bit of inspiration to see how things are put together.
Hi, Reese.
Yes.
Richard Kelsey's got a question. Richard, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, it's about the distribution. We've used them before, and basically when modules are not really up to speed, basically they're not compatible with the latest version of Drupal. Sometimes the core version gets left behind. So that's my question, really. How often does it get updated?
Well, the actual distribution itself is just it's just a composer file, really. So
okay, so we can just change it in there.
Yeah, you can do.
Yeah.
So you can manage those dependencies. So the same way that you have your own project, you'd still be responsible for managing those dependencies. I don't think they're tying to specific versions of modules yet. I think they're all down to work with the latest, but I'll let the guys jump in and correct me if that's wrong. But in terms of getting up and running, we just use the project as a base, get up and running, and then from then onwards, it's up to us to maintain sort of that updates and stuff going forward.
Cool.
Can I just chip in for a second as well, because I'm on the sort of core team. So we've sort of thought very carefully about the components that we use, the contrib modules that Drupal provides. So what we're always doing is looking for things that have sort of got an active community around them. A good example of that is Claro, is the admin theme that we're using, which has got a lot of contributors from around the world. So I think we're sort of safeguarding that way. We're not picking stuff that's old or unsupported, but also because we're a bigger team across multiple councils, we're also finding that we can start contributing to these things ourselves. So if there's things that we want to get done, we're able to, we've now got more capacity and more people and more skills to actually get them done. Which, remembering when I was in Brighton and, when we were on our own in Croydon, there's no way we would ever been able to do that. So it's a bigger club that's able to take more of a view and more ownership of this stuff.
Yeah,
and that's really benefited us.
We have used Open Atrium before, and it was well behind all the time, and it was just a nightmare to manage. So we got rid of it in the end.
Yeah, we haven't found that, but I mean, it's something that we're, whenever you pick open source, and there are better people to talk about this, Finn and others on this call, that's always a bit of a risk. You're kind of you're in the throat. What's the word? You depend on what the community does.
Yeah.
But that's why we're thinking very clearly about the modules that we pick and how we use them and what our exposure to them is. So we're sort of being quite careful about that.
Yeah, I would just echo that as well from our experience. Like if we look at the actual code base, we're not. It's not drawing on loads of vast different modules really. Like it is being built from quite a small subset of modules, which does reduce that dependency and those sort of update nightmares that you can get. I mean, I know Open Atrium is very opinionated and has a lot of features going on. So I'd have used that before in the past in Drupal 7. And yeah, that, you know, keeping update with that is much more difficult than something like this, where they have sort of small isolated features that don't have so many dependencies between each other. So, I mean, this is the full list. I think if you're using everything, I guess at some point you're going to run into some sort of update issue where there's a dependency there. But from our experience so far, we're not using the full list, and what we are using, you know, all the modules are quite well established and well supported, so we shouldn't run into any issues with sort of the core getting left behind or vice versa.
Cool.
Okay, so, you know, as I mentioned, there are some more features that are available in LocalGov, more coming, but, you know, there's just to reel off some there. And, you know, I haven't really done them justice, really, those individual points. There's a lot more to some of those modules than what the detail that I've given. So in terms of us using LocalGov for Westminster and RBKC, we've got a bit of project background here, which I'll let the is it Alistair or Lee can jump in?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. So Westminster and RBKC got me on board last year with a need for just to simplify, centralize, and share their digital service. And what that led to was the need for a new CMS. So we ran a discovery phase around what users needed, internal and external. And we ran a technical discovery phase as well. And at the end of that, having looked at CMSs like Sitecore, Jadu, Goss, and even WordPress.org with a headless CMS, we chose Drupal 8. And that's for the reasons that Reese gave earlier, the sizable development community, scalable architecture. And once we chose Drupal 8, Will Callahan very patiently coaxed us and spoke to us. And, you know, it seemed like a no-brainer to me that we should join in the LocalGov project, because we wanted to share, we wanted to have a simple central digital service, and that's exactly what they were offering. And eventually sort of took it through senior management and member sign-off and joined in. And just to compare and contrast, actually, the last project I worked on was a re-platform of CMS for Barnet Council, which Capita did. Capita charged Barnet $200,000 for the design of the page templates in the CMS, and we were just able, through joining this this project, to sidetrack those costs entirely. So it just was an absolute no-brainer to join in. So the way that we've run the project is that because putting together Discovery Alpha and Beta into one tender would have led to a lot of delays because of the budget, we broke down the tender so that we awarded separate tenders for Discovery and Alpha, and also Beta. Zucha won the tender to deliver the alpha phase, and one of the slightly impossible things we asked them to do was to develop page templates that were user-led, that were based on significant demographically based user research from within the borough, but also to iterate them from LocalGov so that we could still use the code base. And they managed to square that circle really well, partly, I think, because the LocalGov templates follow the same kind of good methodology around user research to begin with. And if you're a council, I suppose that a lot of the tasks that you're going to be asking your users to do, they'll find the same, you know, they'll be looking for the same kind of thing. Meanwhile, Kensington and Chelsea were redesigning their site with a similar user-led approach on D7. So it wasn't to do necessarily a re-platform to D8 just yet, but once they had their design sorted out, we came together for a shared beta phase, and Zucha won that tender. So that started in September. And the really uncanny thing about the Kensington and Chelsea redesign was that a lot of the page designs that they came up with, almost exactly to an uncanny level, echoed page or template designs that LocalGov had put forward completely independently. So there was a happy serendipity there, in that we didn't really need to alter what they'd done to a significant extent in a lot of cases to bring them on board with this too. So that's the project background, and Zucha are very busy and again very patiently building the sites for us now, and we're in just beginning UAT of the first template designs that have come through. So that's my introduction.
Thank you, Alistair. So I think Richard's going to talk a little bit about the alpha phase.
Yeah, so just taking a small step back in terms of the story from what Alistair was just telling there, with the alpha phase, we kind of started a bit earlier on before the collaboration was kind of formalized. So we had to get going with what we could use. So we planned our one-to-one research, making sure we're in line with user needs every stage. After the first round of face-to-face, obviously the pandemic hit, and we had to pivot to online remote moderation, and that included sort of the accessibility research and testing as well. Our first iteration, we used the we created a rebranded version of the Brighton and Hove templates, and it was a very good sort of alignment and testament to the work of the project for Brighton and Hove that all the templates performed very well, and gave us a lot of insight and certainly validated the research that we were looking for on whether the sort of shared templates would work for Westminster. Also, alongside that, we ran some information architecture card sorting and tree testing to generate sort of the structures and just make sure that we know the actual build of the website, the content structure would work. And sort of we tested and iterated, refined that as we went. And then after the first iteration, there were 2 more iterations with our designs. So I lost the slides there, Reese. And one also additional iteration which we ran for enhanced experience features. Some of the things that would push sort of the designs a bit over and above what we'd had previously with the toolkit itself. The outputs of the alpha were, I think it was 24 in total we ended up with. There were some additional templates that we had to create bespoke to Westminster. And they were designed and tested in line with user needs. We delivered a design system, which is currently being shared, so that work can be turned around a lot quicker, and also a beta backlog of all the work that is currently being undertaken in beta. And if I pass you over to Hannah to talk a bit about the planning and delivery of beta.
Yeah, sure. I just seen Reece said that his Zoom crashed. So 1 second, I can share the presentation from my screen. Okay.
Are there any questions about alpha while Hannah's doing that, or the research that we undertook? Okay.
I have a question about the research actually, because that'd be just from a sort of LocalGov feeding back into the LocalGov project. That'd be really interesting to hear. At some point, maybe not now, but what things were in line and what things maybe needed to change. Part of the great thing about working together, councils working together, is sharing that knowledge of what's working and what's not, and not having to repeat that kind of research. So it'd be really interesting to catch up at some point on that.
Yeah, I think certainly on that point, that would be good. Something that would be really helpful, I think, to share between councils. So that's one of the challenges we had, is not, obviously we started very early in the process before the collaboration was confirmed, so we didn't have access anyway to the shared learnings. But I know some local councils like Hackney, for example, have built a shared sort of library of research findings. And I think that would be something that we should work on, because it would give people a lot of reasons and sort of rationale for the design decisions that have been made.
Yeah. I think also this is the kind of sort of sharing collaboration that we're seeing now. So we run a product group session every fortnight that Finn and I attend and I facilitate. And the idea is that we talk about shared features, but we don't need every council at everything. And we're finding now that councils that are particularly interested in one aspect of it, they'll go and take that away and work on it on their own with feedback from all the others. So actually, it's not just the components that you get now, it's access to all that collaboration moving forward. I think there's a good example of that. We're looking at HTML publications right now. So Croydon's really interested in this, and a couple of other councils are, but others are able to sort of take a back seat and just let us get on with it and chip in at intervals. So it means you don't have to do all the work on everything anymore. It's been a massive strength and a real boon for us in Croydon, and I think it's starting to pay dividends for other councils too. So if you want to talk about more about that another time, then go for it.
Oh, I think Reese is back. So Reese, can you go to the next slide?
Yep, sorry about that. I don't think my Zoom has ever crashed. So obviously, you know.
Right, so in terms of how we were planning to take forward the alpha outputs from both Westminster and RBKC, I thought I'd talk you through the process just to give you an idea of how we did that and where we are at the moment. So as Will said, at the end of alpha, we had a design prototype that we'd tested with users in a number of iterations. We also had a beta backlog based on those templates. And then obviously we had the RBKC redesigned D7 site as the basis of what would be rebuilt in D8. So obviously there's quite a lot to consider there, also factoring in the functionality that exists in the distribution. So the first step that we undertook as part of planning was to create a master template map, which was essentially all of the LocalGov templates, all of the Westminster template requirements, and then all of the RBKC template requirements. So it's a pretty big matrix, and that just helped us to identify where they converged and where they diverged, and off the back of that to understand, okay, where they do diverge, can they actually converge, i.e. can we use the LocalGov templates and all the stuff that's already built, or do we really have to build anything custom? So from that exercise, it was quite a big undertaking, but thanks to product owners, so Lee and Colin from Westminster side, they worked together to identify, okay, yeah, we're happy to agree that this is the new template moving forward, and how much of it would be reusable, how much would be different on the two different sites. And from that, we essentially, I think, probably be fair to say about 75% of what we're building, we're able to use some form of the LocalGov distribution, and then about 25% there's things that either on the roadmap for LocalGov and we're just a bit too early, or there's some additional enhancements or extra features that the councils wanted in order to fulfill their requirements. So the next step off the back of that, we also did some internal demos. So we set up the distribution and set it up on a server our side, and walked through both teams some of the areas where we just needed to be clear if the existing functionality would work, and give them a sense of how does this work, as obviously they hadn't all been participants in product roadmap meetings and things previously. And these were really useful sessions because most of the time we could say, yeah, this ticks the box, okay, we're all good, just a few tweaks. And then that gave us the basis for our development planning to work out, okay, for example, for service landing page, install LocalGov, make sure that it works, and then pass it to front end, because obviously the front end element was the main bit that we needed to build on top of. And then extending on that, that's essentially our sessions were around backlog refinements. So it was just defining the custom requirements, which is obviously a lot easier than having to spec everything from scratch, and then prioritize, of course. And then the final output of that is our MVP backlog. So at the moment we are building the Westminster site first, but obviously there's quite a lot of shared functionality between Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea. So we have all of the shared functionality and then all of the custom stuff for Westminster in the MVP release for January. And then we have sprints planned for after that for anything that needs to be custom for RBKC. So the front end theme, for example, and some other template tweaks. And yeah, that's sort of a quick summary of the process we went through so far.
Tim, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, have you, on the directory stuff, have you got any user research that you could share with us? So we're actually talking to providers who have listings on our adults directory this afternoon and tomorrow, because we're at the stage where we're trying to establish the user needs for a new single directory platform for the council. And obviously we'd kind of like to avoid redoing huge amounts of work that other people have already done, but also add to it with what we learn from our users.
I think that would be one for Will and Finn, because I mean we haven't got anything on directories, have we, Will Richards?
No, I'm just trying to think. Nothing is on directories as such as the sort of Drupal pattern itself. Ours were more sort of navigation through the site in terms of looking and finding the information, but we didn't research based on the directories pattern.
Okay.
I don't know if Finn has anything or is aware of anything.
Not that I know of, unless Will has anything, but it would be definitely, it's on our sort of mental roadmap of research to do, in the potential beta phase. These kind of patterns where you've got potentially more complicated interactions of searching for big directories, either on maps or not on maps, and faceted filters and that sort of stuff. Accessibility, usability, how people actually want to do that is a massive question, and yeah, it'd be great to be making evidence-based design decisions on that. But we don't have any evidence that I know of at the moment.
So these patterns were developed very early on in the Brighton project, so they're probably about sort of 18 months, 2 years old. And at the time we were looking around for examples of other people doing similar things. I've pasted a link in the chat to the GovUK search pattern, which I worked on when I was at GovUK. So you can see it's sort of a two-column layout with facets down the left-hand side and results in the sort of middle column. That had a lot of research done on it that I was involved with. So we decided to adopt that as a starting point. We ran a few sessions internally in Brighton, but there's not a lot written down, sadly. I think that's part of the problem with this, is that council teams are not resourced to do big, exhaustive research projects on these things.
Yeah, so, absolutely, that's our problem.
which is I mean, so I remember that, but those particular conversations, it's okay. Well, we've got to get a prototype done in sort of 2-3 sprints. What's out there? What can we test? Internally with the limited amount of user research capability we have. What prototypes can we build? Okay, well, basically we're just gonna have to go with this.
That's pretty much where we are as well.
I mean, what we might be able to share, but not by tomorrow, is we've got Hotjar running across Croydon, where directories are used extensively. There's lots and lots of directories there, and we've got Hotjar on all of them.
That would be really helpful. It would be interesting to see. I appreciate not by tomorrow, but certainly would be interesting to see what users are saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's less sort of interviews and sort of text comment. It's much more heat mapping. Where are people clicking? What's performing? What's not? And pretty much you're getting what you expect. Facets are new to some people, although they've got sort of big use on e-commerce sites. People kind of know what's happening with them. The text box gets a lot of interaction, and we know that's a weak point on the distribution at the moment. It's not a great search. It could be a lot better. But largely, people are typing in the text box. They're using the facets a bit, and they're drilling down into entries. So it's largely doing what we expect it to do. I just haven't got anything written down. Drop me a line, and I'll see what heat map stuff we can get.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Cheers, Will.
No worries.
Smashing. So moving on to the LocalGov features that we're actually using for the build so far, and I mean, you'll see that directories is missing from the list. There are plans to use directories, but just not for this phase at the moment. So I'll show a couple of screenshots to match up to these points, so it's not just all words. But essentially, we're using the core of the distribution, which is a requirement. Out of the box, some nice things there. We've got the workflow, like an editorial workflow that's already been set up, which is fairly logical, and we actually, Colin and Leah actually went through and created a workflow for their sort of web team, their media team, and they actually pretty much matched up exactly to the workflow out of the box, other than sort of some custom notifications and timings, but the general, passing content from review to approved to archived, all of that was pretty standard and matched lovely to the workflow that came out of the box. And then the media support out of the box and the core is nicely set up, and it has integration with the sort of the WYSIWYG and stuff like that. So just again, other things that you don't need to really take care of because they've been handled for you. We're using the guides, so I'll show you an example of that. The step-by-step isn't for Westminster, but RBKC want that. So the example I'll show will be the LocalGov distributions version of that. And then we're using events. We've extended the events a little bit further. So that's something that we're thinking about. We might be able to contribute back. We're using the services extensively. So the service landing pages, the sub landing pages, and also the service statuses. So you can sort of set, an alert or around the actual, the current status of a service, which again, I'll show you that. And then we're also using the alert banners, which I spoke about earlier. So in terms of the core, just sort of out of the box there, just a little screenshot on the left showing the media library, just for embedding content into sort of the WYSIWYG or anywhere else where you're using the media library in Drupal. Over on the right is just sort of the workflow that you get out of the box. The guides here, so we have our sort of standard guide page on the right, and then on the left you've got sort of the admin page. You can see sort of those sub pages on the bottom left here. These are all the pages that are nested inside that build up this sort of table of contents for you automatically. Then you've got your sort of previous and next buttons, which is just sort of a block in Drupal, so you can move that around wherever you want it to be. So there wasn't any, I don't think, customizations required to this page at all, if I remember rightly. I think we may have added the related links to appear on all sub pages, but in terms of what we got out of the box, we almost used it like for like, really, just moved it around at the theme layer to match what we needed. And stuff like adding the sub pages getting pulled into the guides. So if you create a sub page and choose the guide as the overview guide as the parent, it automatically populates this list for you, so it maintains that relationship for you. So that was quite a nice feature where we didn't really have to do much back-end wise. The step-by-step, which we're going to be using for our RBKC, so this is what it looks like on the distribution. We haven't seen the designs for RBKC yet, but again, I should imagine we get these sort of previous and next buttons down here, and you can see the full list of all the pages in the actual steps there, so the user can see what where they're expected to end up. Again, I don't foresee that we'll probably be changing much on that, if anything. And we've got the events here. So the events out of the box has sort of all the things that you'd expect, like location, some dates around when the event's on. We added some extra functionality for the include and exclude of dates, just to match the existing requirement that Westminster already had. So again, that's something that we might be able to contribute back to the project as an optional add-on. We have these sort of sub pages here on the event, so it's a bit like the guide page where you can have those separate sub pages. You can't see it on the screenshot here, but we have the previous and next buttons as well, which again, we just sort of lifted the functionality that was there, just changed it slightly for the events. So in terms of code reuse, we pretty much reused that section without having to worry about planning and thinking about and architecting it ourselves. That we already used the solid code that was already there and working, and we sort of created this concept of sub pages on the events, which is something that we're thinking about again contributing back. But out of the box, again, if you didn't have these sub pages, it pretty much had everything that we needed. I mean, we added the header image in there, I think, with the CTA, but other than that, a really good solid starting point for events. And then the services, which is the real bread and butter of the site. So this is a service landing page. And again, I think we added the header image in there. But in terms of what you get out of the box, you get these sort of common tasks here, and then these are all the sub pages within inside the service. So we made some changes to this again, but very minimal, really. Most of 95%, I think, that's on this page was already here, and it's just some of the decisions around how the content relate to each other and stuff like that, how the breadcrumbs and how the URL patterns and stuff like that are created is already taken care of again, and they're all very sound decisions, so stuff that you don't really have to worry about. The service status, which is like a sub module for the services, so you can create these sort of service statuses and then link them to a service page, and you can't see it over here in this previous design. Can't remember if we're having it on our designs where it will show the service at the bottom, the status at the bottom, but out of the box on the distribution, if you create sort of a status for this service, it will appear here. And I think we have made some tweaks you get this sort of overall service status update page as well, which will give you all the individual services, the status of all the individual services that you've got out there at the moment, in one overarching page, which is quite handy to link to, especially if you've got quite a few different services or with different statuses at the time, so that the user just can get an overall view of everything and the status of everything that you're offering. And they do show up individually on each landing page, like I just said, but there isn't any example of that there in our designs. We extended it slightly so that we can use it on, so if, for example, we attach a service to this landing page, a status to this landing page, the author has the option for it to show on all sub pages within that service if necessary. And they can also hide the service, so the status, if there's an update, they can hide it once they've seen it once, and it won't show on all the sub pages, which is actually a feature that we copied from the alert banners. So we again reuse the code that was there. The alert banner has this sort of close, and when that closes, the user won't see the alert banner anymore. We added that feature to our service status so that the users can get an idea of the service status. If they've seen that there's an outage on something, they can hide it, and then they won't see it on all those sub landing pages. And out of the box, again, you have this alert banners, is very handy. That you get the option to put them live and take them down, and you can see a list of all of the banners that you've got in the system. And they can all have like different publishing statuses, whether they're sort of active or not. Yes, so that was the pretty much a quick rapid fire view of the different features that we're using. So I spoke a little bit about what we have extended on those examples, and some things that we're looking to extend from the local gov, or maybe potentially put back into it. So we've got these extended service statuses, like I said, where we can show them on the sub pages for a different service. We've created a news section, which is actually something that was happening at the same time, I believe. So they've just created a newsroom in one of the recent sprints. So that was sort of like parallel development there, which is a bit of a shame, because if we were a little bit ahead a little bit behind on the timeline, we may have been able to utilize the news there and not have to make those sort of design decisions if we don't need to in terms of the actual build, especially if we've got any sort of like user research based and behind that. So we make sure that what we're doing is actually going to perform well. And like I said, we extended the events to create sub pages. We did a bit more work with the dates. We created quite a few campaign components. So for our landing pages within Westminster, they are very different to what you get in the distribution out of the box. So some of those components, we're looking at how we could potentially commit them back to the distribution, so that out of the box, the sub sites that they've just been working on might have some nice new fancy components that can be used for the user to build upon. And we created a consultation policy papers, content types, which again might be something that other councils are going to be interested in. So there's some designs, and we've got the research behind that. So again, something else that we might be able to wrap up nicely and include as an optional sort of sub module for the distribution. And we created a major work section. So you can see all of the planned works and ongoing works and the project life cycle, the project status of in all the different neighborhoods, and how the sort of timelines for all of those. That was quite a substantial section. So again, something that I guess applies to all councils, so something that we could wrap up and potentially put down as another sub-module. And some of the things that we're doing at the moment, so around the content lifecycle, so which is something that I think is actually planned or being thought about on the timeline for LocalGov Drupal, is around sort of having that automatic archiving of content, or setting content to be needs review every 6 months or something like that, and then the notifications that come with that. So if somebody sends a piece of content for approval, that you get a notification for it. If a piece of content that you wrote 6 months ago is going to be archived because if you haven't re-reviewed it in the last 6 months, another notification, for example. So again, something else that we're looking at. And then in terms of the front end, we're using Storybook with Emulsify, and making potentially a base theme from that people could extend out from, might be something that's worthwhile contributing back, save people a lot of time, gives people a good foundation to work from. In terms of the developer experience, I have to say it's been very good. It's really easy to set up. The documentation that's there is very good and improving. There's a documentation site that I think is just in the works at the moment. But in terms of all the modules, the coding's there, the coding that's there, the readmes are there for each module. If they're self-explanatory, then there's not so much. If there's a bit more detail to them, then that detail is included. The tests that come with it are all decent. I mean, they're all good test coverage of everything that they're doing. So it's not just throwing stuff in and hoping that it will work. The custom code that's there is to a very high standard. Everything that we've seen and the stuff that we've used and reused is all very good, and there's a kind of thing that we would definitely pump out ourselves through code review and make sure that it meets a high standard. The features have been very well thought out. So the dependencies there are some dependencies between some of the modules, but they've tried to keep them as separate as possible, so you can pick and choose what you need. The way that stuff's been built was easy to extend. So like the service status that we extended, and the events and that kind of stuff. There was no sort of decisions made, architectural decisions made that sort of back you into a corner. I've mentioned the testing, and the guys behind it were very helpful at the start, and there's a Slack channel where you can jump in, and everyone's quite happy to help you out with anything that you need in terms of using the distribution. So overall, very positive for us. I know you spoke about someone spoke about Open Atrium previously. That's a very difficult piece of kit to pick up and start working with. In comparison, this is a lot smaller footprint, but the experiences for me were miles apart. So I think I've probably done all that as well in terms of summary, but the main thing there obviously is out of the box that we used a significant amount of the features, and I think actually some of the features that came with the distribution actually helped guide some of the decisions, and even help the sort of product owners as well say, actually, no, we will align with what's there rather than do it custom. Why do we need to do it different? If what's been done is decent and working, there's no reason for us to have it slightly different. So quite often, those requirements end up aligning with what was already out of the box, which obviously then translates into some pretty big time saving, and then also standardization across the project. So we're talking about using Westminster and RBKC. So having that guideline or that baseline already there, that helps sort of standardize between the two websites as well, because they do things differently, but they've tried to really pull them in alignment as well and standardize, which obviously is just going to be better for everybody in terms of time state saving and code coverage and testing and that kind of stuff. And in summary, it can be used as a foundation for a new site and be built upon quite easily. And from what we can see and how we've been using it, very maintainable. Like I said, it's not drawing upon a vast amount of contrib modules or anything like that. Try to use core as much as possible and just very well established modules. So we're not getting sort of locked into some very small smallly used modules that don't really have much maintenance behind them. Might end up getting you into a situation where you can't, like someone mentioned before, like you can't really upgrade very easily. Contribute back to the project. So there is the LGD product group that meets every 2 weeks. I'll be honest, at the moment we, I've jumped ahead there. we haven't actually joined in with this contributing back at the moment because of our timelines have been pretty tight, but it has been on the back of our mind the entire time. We're always jotting down the things that we think that we're going to be able to contribute back, and sort of preparing for this presentation actually has helped us pluck out some of the things that we think that would be quite beneficial. But there is a product group that meets every 2 weeks, and I think that's the point where you can join in and get involved there. I think Will and Finn will probably be able to talk that up a bit better than what I have so far. But essentially, anything there, there's a contributing README in there in the distribution as well, so you can see what how to get involved, how to contribute back, and what the process is with the project. And I've got a slide here just in case anyone wants the slides after, just with a couple of the notable resources so people can get an idea of where the code base is, the documentation site, and the roadmap, which is sort of a Trello board. NEQ and A.
Does anyone have any questions at all?
Can I ask, are you doing any work around the search? We're using the Solar, and to be honest, I'm not very happy with the out-the-box results.
Yeah, we are doing some work around search. We're using Funnelback. I don't know, Reese, if you want to.
Yeah, so I think it was mentioned by Will as well that obviously one of the things that hasn't really been taken care of is search. That's quite a large and complicated thing to be tackling, especially when you don't know what all of the features that are going to be utilized by each individual team, I guess. I mean, we're using Funnelback, so for us, the client had a requirement to use Funnelback, which is, and we have used it before. And for us, we're using it in quite a limited way, so we're not doing anything too fancy with the search at the minute on this project. I don't know if Will and Finn have any ideas about anything in the timeline around search.
Yeah, absolutely. So the right now the distribution just uses Google custom search, and there's a historical reason for that. We grappled with Solar when we were in Brighton, and really just didn't have the people or the skills to do it justice. It's probably similar to the other person who spoke just now. It's quite hard to get right. We don't think that Google custom search is going to be around for very long, and conversations have already started about what the distribution is going to offer, which might be Solar or something similar. So if you want to join a chat about that and talk about the kind of things that you would like to see, we would happily facilitate. Yeah, we'd love to facilitate that, because we know it's weak at the moment. It doesn't really do what we want it to do.
I mean, we've got Google custom search on our current site, but we've gone with Solar as part of the Drupal. So we went live yesterday.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm really in need of is like a standard pseudonyms list, because we're all the same. Our clients come in and ask for bins rather than wheelie bins, etc. And at the moment, it's down to me to put them in manually on every page to make it work. So something like a group one of those that we could all use, that would be great.
Absolutely. I mean, I used to grapple with this at Gov UK on their search, and it's a total pain. But I think that we're noticing as a group of councils that there are tasks like this that we can share. We don't all have to do individually. We've seen the same thing with accessibility, with privacy, and with some of these features. It's something that we can get to as a group and crack it together, rather than all having to spend money on it. So if you're keen to sort of be involved with that, I mean, we see this as we happen to be a club of councils that use LocalGov Drupal, but we're interested in talking to other councils who use Drupal, even if they're not using our distribution specifically, because there's things that we'll be able to share regardless. And I think wider than that, we're a group of practitioners who publish web content for councils. So there are issues outside of Drupal that we've all got an interest in and a stake in, and that's what we're starting to see, now in the councils that we work with. they're taking learnings from our project and they're applying it to some of their other technologies, you know, in low code or elsewhere, you know, some of the best practice that we're establishing. So I think let's stay in touch if you're up for it, because I think there's a lot more we can do.
I think we'd certainly be keen for that at Bath and North East Somerset. I think, you know, I think we're going to go away and look at a little bit more and see whether getting involved with this would work for us. But certainly, just as Drupal users and, you know, tackling common problems, we'd certainly be keen to keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely. And the way the distribution's built, it's not a monolith. It's you should. We've not done it, but we intend to be able to take components and add them to other Drupal distributions. It's a componentized thing. So if you just wanted directories, for example, you don't want anything else, you should be able to do that. There are no dependencies or very loose dependencies with other things that we've built.
That's exactly what we were considering.
Yeah.
I think Rich is just saying he's going away to try it this afternoon.
yeah, do. And let us know how you get on. I mean, there are loose hooks, and Finn can describe this way better than me. There are loose hooks into services. So, for example, if you've got services and then you install directories, these things talk together. But that's not a hard dependency. You know, you can use it without. So, you know, we've not done it ourselves because we generally all need the components. But by all means, go and try it and see how you get on. And if there's a pull request, we accept those, or just comments. We absolutely accept those. We welcome them. So,
brilliant. Thanks.
Project to say we're actually building a solar search. We use Emulsify as well on our site, and we've just built everything in house. So we have directories, events, all that kind of stuff. Quite similar to yours. We're trying to build out 3 solar servers that match our Pantheon environment, so like a dev, production, and live. So, but this is likely to be in the new year, so it might be worth me feeding back how we've done it or something like that.
Yes, please do. That'd be awesome.
The other question I had was, do you support any kind of groups in the back end? So, for example, contribution, we organise our content by the departments that will contribute. So we will set up a group with a subgroup, so it might be like a division and team at a sort of council organisation level, and then only allow their content to be seen and edited within that group.
I can take this one, or Finn, do you want to?
There's nothing in there yet, but that's the kind of shared need that could come in the future. Yeah, there's no group-based permissions yet in the core in LocalGov Drupal.
So for content contribution, do you just release the whole thing? Because we came up with a solution of doing web forms for some of our directories, and that would just automatically create content types instead of opening up the whole thing, because groups has now moved on with release of Drupal 9.
I mean, I think at the moment it's basically just roles, you know, and so creating different roles for different groups of permissions based on different content types rather than areas of the site.
Right.
At the point at which you need to get to more specific, group-based permissions, like, sort of section-based or other hierarchy-based permissions, then that's a kind of next level of complexity which could totally be included, but it's not there at the moment.
Right.
I think we're very much sort of, our needs are based on the councils that have joined.
Yeah.
They either seem to use a sort of GDS 2i model, or they want to move in that direction. So you generally have content designers. You don't have to call them content designers, but that's what we call them. Who can pretty much do everything, but they're discouraged from publishing their own work. What they really should do is push it across to somebody else to publish for them.
Yeah.
And then authors who can basically edit and create but not publish. And those two building blocks basically drive everything.
We call that content champions and content editors.
Same thing. And what we're thinking of doing next, we just haven't found a need, a real need yet, is that we think that some of the directory stuff will be federated. that, you know, be third parties doing that work or groups doing that work. And I think that's about the time when we'll get to this. So you'll say, I don't know, the community organisation runs the send directory, therefore they write all the content and somebody in our team approves it, something like that.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at for directories. So actually it's kind of third-party providers, some internal services as well, but allowing them to create an account, manage their own listings, manage their events, and have those moderated by a central team before they're actually published live.
Yeah, we just released our shop finder last night, and that's what we're using, the web form. It will publish the media items, but everything else goes through an approval for the content editor to review and approve, and then publish to the site.
Yeah.
We've got phases in adding features. That's kind of how we do it, because as I say, it's only me doing a whole lot, so sometimes it's quite an achievement to get something out when they want like 10 or 20 new features.
That sort of permissions-based stuff is not far off. So in Croydon, we've literally this week just created a custom directory entry type for schools. That's not managed by our team, it's managed by the schools team. And what they've done in the past is send us PDFs that we have to upload. It's horrendous. We've said, look, do a directory. We'll create it for you this time, but ultimately, do you want to do it yourselves? And they're going, yes, please. So it's really not, it's not far away. Early next year.
That's exactly what we're doing. We've got a comms team in the People and Communities Directorate who manage these directories. So we're putting something in place for them that's low maintenance and low overhead for them to manage. But gives us something that's much easier to support because it's 3 directories in one single place.
We did this similar. This is how, because we moved from Oracle to Drupal 8, so that's how we were doing it. But obviously, for release, we had to do MVP. Like to try and launch your site in 4 months. The number of pages you've got, content edit and everything. So yeah, I mean, we're quite happy to share our experience, especially with the group modules we've been using, because it's actually a nightmare now to upgrade from 9. Just breaks the entire site. So maybe some of my feedback might help yourselves when you come to it.
Sounds brilliant.
Well, maybe just one other thing to add to that. Just an experience from Oxfordshire County Council where they weren't using groups, but they do have single sign-on linked with their Azure Active Directory or whatever, and that allows them to control the Drupal roles that people get within Drupal directly from their centralized user management in the Active Directory. So I think teachers can essentially log in because they've already got an account, and they can log in and manage certain bits of content on the site. So that kind of thing is also potential for bringing into the distribution if it's useful for more than one council.
Excellent. Any more questions before we potentially draw to a close? And obviously a lot of discussion, which has been good, a lot of interaction. I will hook up with the guys from Zucha and also Finn and Will, and maybe we can get an email round robin going so you can keep in touch with this group of Drupal people. But there will be a recording that I will share, and there's been some really useful resources posted in the chat, which I shall send round. If anyone doesn't have any more questions, I'd like to thank Will, Hannah, Tom, Finn, and Will, and please send Will our regards, other Will, ill Will that was.
Yeah,
now Will getting back on the mend. But yeah, as soon as I've got the recording ready, I shall send it over just for Zucha to have a quick look over it, make sure it's ready. But yeah, thanks very much for your participation, everyone. Today has been really good session. Enjoy the rest of your days tomorrow and the weekend, and yeah, we'll make sure that everyone gets to keep in touch, because obviously you've all got quite a lot to offer each other, I think, as a group of people and a collective. So I will make sure I do my damnedest to facilitate that. Enjoy the rest of your days, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Nick. You're a star.
Cheers. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
See you later.